Chapter 13. It took Joyce, Deegan, and Cray a full hour from leaving Deegan's room to make the arranged meeting place 6 levels below the human section. They had been forced by Larson's goons to double back twice, and at one point had climbed 3 levels up to go over a guard station. Now Joyce was leading, light gripped in her teeth as she climbed down a narrow stone shaft. The ladder hadn't been used by anyone in years, and the dust on the steps was making it slippery. She could feel her fingers growing tender from all the climbing and scraping on the stone, and she had long since lost the feeling in her feet from the cold. She had thought of stopping in her room to grab some heavier clothes, but then figured the risk just wasn't worth it. She'd go down into the cold again, but it wouldn't be that long until they were back up in the human levels, fighting. She figured she could stand the cold for that long. But now she was beginning to regret that decision. She reached the 7th level down and stepped aside, waiting for Cray and Deegan to make their way down the shaft and join her. While she waited, she flashed her light around the intersection of the vertical shaft and 2 horizontal shafts. She could go in 6 directions from here, into pitch blackness, and for some reason that made her feel safe. At least safe from the professor's guards. She glanced around at the dust on the floor, noting that a very large number of men wearing boots had come this way at one point from the direction of the alien section. She flashed the light in the direction of where they were supposed to meet the others. No tracks at all in the dust. They would be making the first. That was both good and bad. She let her light trail along the other tracks as Cray joined her and noticed what she was doing. "Looks like a type of combat boot," Cray said, kneeling down and looking closely at one clear print. "Larson's goons?" Joyce said. Cray shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. They almost always wear a sneaker-type shoe that matches their green pants. Remember?" Now that he mentioned it, she did. Sometimes they squeaked when they walked. She glanced down at the trail in the grey dust. "Then who?" Cray shrugged. "Some of the Marines, maybe." "That can't be, unless they're old tracks." "They don't look that old to me," Cray said and stood. "Of course, down here it might be hard to tell. They went down there." He pointed at the continuation of the shaft they had just climbed down. From her rough map, it went down at least another 4 levels, maybe more. "But the Marines are all dead," Joyce said. "Unless—" "Dead," both Deegan and Cray said almost simultaneously. Deegan jumped off the last step in the rock and joined them. "How can an entire platoon of Marines be dead?" "I'm afraid it's very possible," Joyce said. "From what I heard, the professor promised to send them home, then landed their shuttle on the far side of the alien section." "Maybe they fought their way free," Deegan said. "Marines are real good at that sort of thing." "That they are," Joyce said, "when they have ammunition." "And they didn't?" Deegan asked. "That's right, they didn't." Her breath was making a swirling crystal pattern in the lamplight between them. "At least that's what Hank told me." She glanced down the dark tunnel in the direction the tracks came from, then down the hole. What should they do? If it was the Marines, they would be a great help against the professor. But if it wasn't, she could be walking into some sort of trap. And they were already late getting to the agreed meeting point. She turned to Cray and Deegan. "I think we need to get to the meeting, then maybe come back and follow those tracks." Cray nodded. "Sounds logical." That it does, boss, Deegan said. Lead the way. With her rifle cradled in one arm and her light in the other, she headed off through the black tunnel at a quick pace. Her sneakers kicked up a fine spray of dust. This was the right decision. She knew it, but she was in a hurry to get back. She tried to keep up a good pace to keep herself warm, and she could hear Deegan panting behind her. 3 intersections later, the tunnel made a sharp turn to the left and suddenly widened. A lantern held back some of the dark in the center of the large area, and Joyce could see that 3 other tunnels came in from the left and 2 from the right, like spokes of a lopsided hub. It was like the long room's walls had been decorated with rock and black holes. A very odd look, the way the lantern was sitting in the center. Crouched with their backs to the walls and rifles ready were Kent and 2 others, their guns trained on them. "Hold your fire," Joyce said, quickly raising her hand and pointing her light into her own face so they could see her. The 3 guns lowered, and 10 other men and 2 women with rifles stepped out of the black holes of nearby tunnels. Kent smiled. "Glad you could make it." 2 new recruits, Joyce said, and then quickly did the introductions for Cray and Deegan. The others introduced themselves around the circle, and then Kent said, "Not all are back yet, I'm afraid." "Hank? Jonathan?" Kent shook his head. "I heard some shots up a few levels from where I was earlier, but I don't know who it was or what happened." "Let's give them all some more time," Joyce said. She swallowed the thought that Hank might have been captured or killed. She wouldn't think about that. With Larson's goons in some of the ventilation shafts, they might have had to circle a long way around to get here. Kent nodded and pointed to 3 of the men who came out of the tunnels. "Might want to go back on guard duty." They nodded and started to turn when Joyce said, "Hang on a second. There might be something we need to do, and I want everyone involved in the decision." They all stopped, waiting for her, so she went on. "We saw a large number of tracks in the dust about 300 meters back. It might be some of the Marines who survived being dumped into the alien sector." "Really?" Kent asked, his voice clearly excited. Another man said, "Would that be possible? Amazing!" Joyce glanced around and could tell they were all excited at the thought. There was no doubt the Marines would be on their side in the upcoming fight. "The tracks looked like Marine boots," Cray said. "No telling how old the footprints are, but it should be pretty easy to track them to find out." "Which," Joyce said, "if you all agree, is what I propose to do." "God, yes," Kent said. He glanced around. "Anyone have any objections in trying to find the Marines if there are any of them still alive?" Seeing no objections, he turned back to Joyce. "What's your idea?" Joyce pointed to Cray and Deegan. "The 3 of us head back and follow the tracks for an hour or so. If we have no luck, we'll come back here within 2 hours. "We'll wait," Kent said. He turned and pointed to a large crack in the stone above head, high on one wall. "If we're not here, I'll leave you a note in that crack." "Sounds good," Joyce said. "You 2 want to join me?" She turned to Cray and Deegan, and both nodded. "Anywhere you go, boss. I'm with you." "There's no need, Captain Palmer." The voice was deep, solid, and seemed to fill the room with a sound of command. Everyone in the room dropped instantly to their stomachs on the floor in a wide circle, guns ready, pointing outward at the tunnels around them. Joyce could feel the sweat on her hands suddenly as she clicked the rifle to automatic fire and focused on the black hole in the wall. One leg was slightly draped over Cray's, and it felt good there, like he would anchor her.
"We'll come to you,"
the voice said.
"Don't fire!"
Out of the shadows of the tunnel, directly in front of Joyce, stepped Sergeant Green, his hands in the air and a huge smile on his face. He had a bandage on his arm and was so covered with dirt and dust that he seemed grey. A moment later, from every tunnel leading into the room, a Marine stepped forward into the light. Joyce didn't know whether to shout for joy or be angry as hell that they had so easily been surrounded. So instead, she put her forehead down on the cold stone floor and said, under her breath, "Thank you, thank you."